first data snapshot we have is a bar chart indicating grade 6 through 8 reading proficiency for 2016. The graph on the left you will see are grades 6, 7, and 8, which is Lake Placid Middle School. In the blue, their proficiency percentages compared to how children in grades 6, 7, and 8 did across New York State. And you'll see as you look at grade 6, for example, about 27% of the students at Lake Placid School scored in the proficient range on the English Language Learning Art New York State Assessment Test, which was given in the spring of 2016. That's compared to roughly 34% of sixth graders across the state. So there is quite a significant gap there in how our sixth graders performed. It's important to keep in mind, though, that in a school district as small as ours, that kind of information needs to be disaggregated. For example, I know at the sixth grade level, we have a higher percentage of children with learning disabilities. And when there are only 60 children in the entire sixth grade, that certainly can affect the overall scores, particularly when we're talking about one test at one point in time. When we look at the seventh graders, we see that about 27% of the Lake Placid children scored in the proficient range, and that is compared to 35% of the children across the state. And finally, looking at the eighth graders, our eighth graders performed much more on par with the eighth graders across the state. So when you look at this data, it's important to keep in mind that we need to figure out what is causing our sixth and seventh graders fewer of them to perform in the proficient range than the children across New York State. And there are a number of things we need to look at, the number of children that are learning disabled, what kind of curriculum we're using, who's teaching the sixth and seventh grade curriculums. There's definitely a lot of room for improvement and a lot of room to really take a microscope to this data and figure out what it is we need to do as a district to improve the data. And just as a point of comparison, the chart on the right shows the same data, but it shows it in a slightly different way. So in the chart on the right, I put the school data all in one slide, and you see a huge increase in the performance when we hit the eighth grade. And if you look at the state data on the right of this second chart, you see kind of the same thing. You still see that the children in sixth and seventh grade across the state did much better than the Lake Placid kids in terms of the number of children scoring in the percentage of children scoring in the proficient range. But you also see this huge jump in the percentage of proficiency in eighth grade. And I put that chart there just as kind of a reminder, because I'll talk about this in some slides coming up. There's a lot of test refusal in New York State. Many parents are, as a point of civil disobedience, refusing to let their children take the New York State test because they say it's not developmentally appropriate. And what I find interesting about this chart on the right, particularly the state data, is that there's a huge increase in the percentage of proficiency in eighth grade. And that's also a time when developmentally you also see a huge cognitive increases in terms of the child's ability to reason using abstract reasoning and logic. So there is, this data seems to suggest there is some validity to the notion that cognitive gains can't be forced. There is a certain level of maturation that happens that we just have to kind of wait for. Again, that's all up for debate, but I just thought that was interesting. And it's certainly food for